You spend all day casting into nice, beautiful, clean water, thinking you are doing everything perfectly right, but you go home empty-handed time and time again. What if I told you that the biggest fish in the lake are literally laughing at you from the nastiest, ugliest, most tangled bushes that you purposely avoid? Today, we are talking about a brutal truth in the fishing world. We are talking about casting into the thickest, most snag-prone cover you can find to locate where the real monsters sleep. I promise you by the end of this video, you will discover the exact reason why your catch rate is low and why playing it safe is ruining your chances at a trophy fish. The secret to your success has been hiding right in front of your face, wrapped in thorns and broken branches. So let me ask you right now, are you scared of losing a $5 lure, or do you want to catch the fish of a lifetime? Tell me your honest answer in the comments right now, and let us get into it. This topic is absolutely crucial because fishermen, by nature, are creatures of comfort. We like clean banks. We like easy, long casts. We love the feeling of retrieving our baits smoothly without getting stuck on a log. For decades, we have been told the same old grandpa advice. Fish the drop-offs. Fish the clean weed lines. Throw your bait out into the open and wait for a cruiser. People do this exact same routine for years, and they wonder why they only catch average-sized fish. Here is the reality check. True monster fish, the old, wise veterans of the lake, do not hang out in the open. They do not want to be seen. They want a thick roof over their heads, massive shadows, and an impenetrable fortress of wood and branches. They demand cover. But because we have been conditioned to avoid snags and protect our tackle, we completely ignore the exact places where these giant predators spend 90% of their lives. Let us talk about the fear that holds you back. Picture this scenario. It is early morning. The mist is just rising off the water. The lake is completely silent. You are standing on the bank or sitting in your boat. You look to your left and see a beautiful, clean stretch of open water. You look to your right and see a twisted, ugly mess of fallen trees, thorny bushes, and broken branches. Where do you cast? If you are like 99% of fishermen out there, you take the easy way out. You cast into the open water. Why? Because you are afraid. You are afraid of getting snagged. You are afraid of losing your favorite lure. You do not want to spend the next 10 minutes pulling and tugging on a branch, scaring away all the fish. But this fear is exactly why you are not catching the real monsters. You have convinced yourself that the fish are roaming around in the open, just waiting for your bait to swim by. That is a comforting lie. The truth is much harsher. The open water is for the small fish. The open water is for the young and the foolish. The real giants, the ones that break lines and shatter dreams, they are not out there. They are deep inside that ugly, tangled mess you just ignored. So why do the biggest fish choose the absolute worst places to live? It all comes down to basic biology and survival. A monster fish did not get huge by being stupid. It got huge by being lazy and extremely smart. Think about it from their perspective. Swimming around in open water all day burns a massive amount of calories. It exposes them to bigger predators, to boats, and to the hot, beating sun. They do not want to do that. They want a fortress. They want a thick roof over their heads where they can sit in the dark, perfectly camouflaged, and just wait. A massive, tangled bush in the water provides the perfect ambush point. The thick branches break the water current, allowing the giant fish to hover completely effortlessly. Small bait fish swim into these bushes looking for algae and safety, and boom, the trap is sprung. The monster fish just opens its mouth, inhales the meal, and goes right back to sleep in the shadows. When you cast out into the open, you are hoping a hungry fish happens to swim by. When you cast directly into the heart of a snag, you are knocking on the front door of their house. You are putting the food right on their dinner table. Let us debunk a massive myth that your grandpa probably taught you. We have all heard the old traditional advice. They say you should cast along the edges of the cover. They tell you to run your lure just outside the weed line or parallel to the fallen tree. They claim that an active fish will rush out of the cover to grab your bait. Well, let me tell you something. That might work for a small, aggressive fish. But a giant, old, lazy monster is not going to waste its energy swimming 5 feet out of its fortress just to chase a piece of plastic. Why should it? Food literally swims right past its nose all day long inside the bush. If you are only fishing the edges, you are only catching the secondary fish, the subordinate fish. The big boss claims the best spot in the house, and that spot is right in the middle, in the darkest, most impossible tangle of roots and branches. To catch the boss, you have to go into the boss's office. You cannot stand on the sidewalk and hope he comes out. You have to put your bait right on his desk. This means you must abandon the safety of the edge. You have to look at the thickest part of the bush, the part that makes you cringe, and attack it. Now, if you are going to go into the jungle, you cannot bring a butter knife. You need a machete. Throwing your standard medium-action rod with 8-pound test line into a flooded willow bush is a recipe for absolute disaster. If you hook a true monster in there with light gear, the fight will be over in 2 seconds. The fish will wrap you around a branch, snap your line like a piece of cheap thread, and leave you crying on the bank. You need serious gear for this game. We are talking about heavy, stiff rods. We are talking about braided line, 50-pound test or even 65-pound test. Do not worry about the fish seeing the thick line. When you drop a bait into a dark, dense bush, the fish does not have time to inspect your line. It is a pure reaction strike. They see a shadow dropping fast, and they hit it instantly out of pure instinct. You need that heavy braid because it cuts through the vegetation like a saw. You need that stiff rod because you have to literally winch that fish out of its bedroom before it realizes what just happened. Leave the ultralight setups at home. When you are hunting monsters in the snags, you are engaging in a brutal game of tug-of-war. Let us talk about what you are actually tying onto that heavy line. Lure selection is critical when you are fishing in an underwater forest. If you throw a lure with dangling treble hooks in there, you will get snagged before your bait even hits the bottom. You can forget about crankbaits, spinnerbaits with trailer hooks, and open hook swimbaits. You need something sleek, compact, and completely weedless. A heavy jig with a stiff weed guard is your absolute best friend. A Texas-rigged plastic creature bait with the hook point buried deep inside the plastic is another weapon of choice. You want a heavy weight, like a ½ ounce or even 1 ounce, depending on how incredibly thick the branches are. Why so heavy? Because your bait needs to punch right through the surface canopy. It needs to crash through the leaves and twigs and plummet straight down into the basement where the big fish sleep. A lightweight will just hang up in the upper branches, leaving your bait dangling uselessly in the air. You want a compact, heavy package that drops like a rock, slips through the tight gaps, and lands right on the monster's nose. Keep the colors very simple: black and blue or dark green. Here is a crucial detail that most people completely ignore when they try this. The approach. You have your heavy rod, your heavy line, and your weedless bait. But if you stomp down the bank like an elephant, or crash your boat into the branches, you have already lost the game. The fish that live in these thick snags are highly sensitive to their environment. The branches they live in act like giant underwater antennas. If you bump the edge of the bush with your boat hull, the vibration travels down the wood straight to the fish. They might not swim away, but their mouth will slam shut tight. They go on high alert. You have to be a ghost. Whether you are walking the shoreline or running a trolling motor, you must be absolutely silent. Keep your shadow off the water. If the sun is at your back, crouch down low. Approach the bush very slowly. Do not make long, sweeping casts that splash down like a cannonball. You need to get close. Really close. Sometimes you are only 10 or 15 feet away from the target. The closer you are, the more control you have over your bait. Take a deep breath, quiet your mind, and treat this like you are stalking a wild animal. The cast itself is a beautiful art form. Forget the overhead bomber cast. You are not trying to see how far you can throw your lure. You are performing a surgical strike. We call this specific technique pitching and flipping. You hold the bait in your free hand, dip the rod tip low, and use a smooth pendulum motion to swing the bait silently into the cover. It should enter the water with barely a ripple, just a tiny quiet tick sound. You are looking for a specific hole in the bush. A tiny gap, maybe the size of a coffee can, right in the thickest part of the branches. That is your exact target. Missing your target by 2 inches can mean the difference between a terrible snag and the biggest fish of the entire year. It takes a lot of practice. You will hit the wood, you will get tangled. But when you execute that perfect pitch, and your bait slips silently through the V-shaped crotch of two thick branches, it is a thing of beauty. You leave the reel engaged, or control the spool gently with your thumb, letting the bait fall on a semi-slack line. You want it to drop straight down, perfectly vertical. You want it dropping straight into the abyss, right into the jaws of the beast. Not all bushes are created equal, and you need to learn how to read the cover. If you look at a massive fallen tree, half submerged in the water, it can be extremely overwhelming. Where do you cast first? A rookie will cast at the thinnest, easiest branches on the outside edge, but you know better now. You need to look for the sweet spots. Look for the main trunk of the tree. The thickest piece of wood offers the most shade and the absolute best ambush point. Look for the root wad. If a tree has blown over and the roots are resting in the water, that is prime real estate. The complex network of roots creates a perfect, impenetrable maze for a big fish to hide in. Look for the junction where two massive branches meet. Look for any debris, like dead leaves or floating grass, that has blown into the bush and created an extra roof overhead. Pay attention to the sun. The fish will always position themselves in the darkest shade available. If it is high noon, they will be tucked as far back underneath the thickest part as they can possibly fit. Break the snag down into highly specific targets. Pick the dark corners, the deep holes, and the thickest intersections. Now comes the most intense, heart-stopping part of this entire process, the drop. After your bait silently slips into the water and starts falling down through the branches, time seems to completely slow down. This is the moment of truth. You must watch your line like a hawk. I cannot stress this detail enough. Most strikes in heavy cover happen while the bait is falling. The fish sees it dropping from above, rushes up, inhales it, and stops moving. You might not even feel a pull on your rod. All you will see is your line suddenly jump, or it will twitch sharply to the side, or, the most confusing bite of all, your line just goes slack before it should have reached the bottom. If the water is 5 feet deep, and your bait suddenly stops after falling only 2 feet, a giant fish has it in its mouth. You have to be hyper-aware. Your thumb is gently resting on the spool, feeling for the slightest, tiniest vibration. It is a moment of pure, uninterrupted focus. The world around you completely disappears. If you see that line tick, if you feel a strange, sudden heaviness, if anything feels different than a normal drop, you do not hesitate. You do not wait. You act immediately. The hookset in heavy cover is not a polite request to the fish. It is a violent, explosive reaction. When you detect that bite, you reel down any slack instantly and you hit them with absolutely everything you have got. You swing that stiff rod upward with absolute brutal authority. You are driving a thick, heavy hook through the solid, bony jaw of a monster fish, and you are doing it in a very confined space. If you are gentle, if you just sweep the rod sideways like you are fishing a small crankbait, you will lose the battle. The fish will instantly realize it is hooked, flare its massive gills, wrap your line around a stump, and spit the hook right back at you. You have exactly 1 second of surprise on your side. In that 1 second, your violent hookset must do 2 things. First, it must penetrate the thick hook. Second, it must literally move the fish up and away from the wood. You are trying to startle the fish and turn its head toward you before it can react. Yes, you might accidentally pull a 2-pound fish completely out of the water and send it flying over your shoulder, but when you hook a 10-pound giant, that violence is required. The battle that follows the hookset is pure, unadulterated chaos. You are not letting the fish run. You are not playing the drag and letting them slowly tire out. If you let a fish take 2 feet of line in a thick bush, the fight is completely over. They will weave that braided line through 5 different branches and you will be hopelessly stuck. The drag on your reel should be locked down as tight as it can go. From the moment the hook goes in, you are winching furiously. You are pulling the fish through thick leaves, over breaking twigs, and dragging it directly to the surface. The water will explode. Thick mud will churn up from the bottom. The fish will thrash violently against the surface canopy. You must keep the rod tip high and maintain absolute, unyielding tension. If they get wrapped around a soft, flexible branch, you just keep pulling. Oftentimes, heavy braid will saw right through thin wood or rip the leaves right off. It is not pretty. It is not a graceful, delicate dance on the open water. It is a back-alley brawl in a phone booth. You keep their head up, you keep reeling, and you slide them over the top. You must accept a harsh, unavoidable reality right now. If you commit to fishing the thickest, ugliest snags, you are going to lose tackle. You are going to get hung up constantly. It is mathematically impossible to pitch a hook into a dense thicket of wood hundreds of times a day and not get stuck. You will wrap around a sunken log. Your line will dig deeply into the soft bark of a submerged branch. You will have to break off expensive jigs, plastic baits, and heavy tungsten weights. It is frustrating. It costs money. It completely breaks your rhythm. But you must change your mindset. You cannot let a snag ruin your day. You have to view lost tackle as the simple price of admission. It is the required toll you pay to access the biggest fish in the entire lake. If you go an entire day without getting snagged once, you are not fishing deep enough into the cover. You are playing it far too safe. The guy who loses 5 jigs a day in the absolute worst bushes is the guy who goes home with the photo of a lifetime. When you get hopelessly stuck, do not throw a massive tantrum. Just break it off, tie on a new hook, and get right back to work. Picture a scenario that happens every single spring. You are on a lake that has recently flooded. The water has risen 3 feet straight into the shoreline trees. The typical familiar weed beds are completely submerged and hidden. You see guys out in the middle of the lake, dragging worms on the bottom, loudly complaining that the fish have totally disappeared. They have not disappeared, they have moved. They went straight into the newly flooded willow trees. You quietly paddle your kayak right up to a dense, intimidating cluster of branches. The water is muddy. You cannot see an inch below the surface. You pitch a heavy black and blue jig into a gap, no bigger than a grapefruit. The jig hits the water with a tiny click and falls into the darkness. Your line stops falling prematurely. You reel down the slack, feel a solid, heavy weight, and swing the rod hard. The water explodes like someone dropped a heavy bowling ball. A massive shadow thrashes against the branches. You winch the fish up, dragging half a tree branch with it. While everyone else is complaining about the tough bite in the open water, you just pulled a prehistoric beast out of an impossible bush. Weather conditions completely dictate exactly how deep into the snags the monsters will hide. You must adjust your approach based on what the sky is doing. On a bright, sunny, cloudless day with 0 wind, the biggest fish become incredibly lethargic. The bright sun literally hurts their eyes, and they want absolute dark shade. On these bluebird days, they will not be anywhere near the edge of the bush. They will be pushed back as far into the darkest, deepest, most tangled center of the cover as they can physically fit. Your casts must be absolutely precise, penetrating the deepest heart of the snag. However, if the weather rapidly changes, if heavy dark clouds roll in, or a light rain starts falling, the dynamic shifts completely. The loss of direct sunlight makes the big fish feel much bolder. They might move out of the dense center and hover just on the outer perimeter of the snag, actively waiting to ambush passing prey. On cloudy days, you can start pitching to the outer branches and the shaded edges first. But no matter the weather, the snag remains their home base. You must constantly read the sky and ask yourself where the darkest shadow is. The passing seasons also completely change how you approach heavy cover. Let us talk about the brutal heat of midsummer. The water temperature is peaking. The dissolved oxygen in the open water drops rapidly. Small fish suffer, but big fish, with their massive, heavy bodies, really struggle in hot, stagnant water. They desperately need a place to survive. They find the deepest, thickest laydowns they can possibly locate. A massive oak tree that fell into 20 feet of water is an absolute goldmine in July. The deep branches provide cooler water, while the thick wood provides massive shade from the blazing sun. In the winter, the pattern reverses entirely. You look for dark-colored wood in shallow water that absorbs the heat of the afternoon sun. A single dark stump, baking in 2 feet of water, can hold the biggest fish in the bay on a freezing cold November afternoon. The snag is not just a hiding place for them. It is a fully climate-controlled environment. The wood absorbs heat, blocks heavy current, and provides a highly stable home. You have to start looking at bushes as high-value real estate perfectly designed for seasonal needs. There is a very dangerous myth among anglers that a spot can be simply too thick to fish. You will stare at a massive pile of flood debris, a solid, unbroken mat of floating logs, trash, and tangled vines, and you will say to yourself, there is no way a fish is in there, and even if there is, I cannot get a bait through that mess. That is the exact mindset that leaves the biggest fish completely untouched for years. Let me give you a golden rule to live by. If water can get into it, a fish can get into it. Giant fish have an incredible, shocking ability to navigate through incredibly tight spaces. They will squeeze themselves into a hollow log or under a solid mat of debris where they can barely turn around, just because it offers supreme, unmatched protection. You must be willing to punch right through the roof. If you have a solid mat of floating debris, tie on a 1.5-ounce tungsten weight. Pitch it high into the air so it comes down like a meteor, smashing completely through the crust and dropping into the clean water hidden underneath. Never skip a spot because it looks too thick. The worse it looks, the better it actually is. Positioning yourself correctly before you even make the cast is a tiny detail that separates the amateurs from the absolute pros. If you just drift aimlessly up to a huge bush and throw your bait, what happens when you actually hook a giant? You are suddenly entirely out of position. Your rod is at a terrible angle, the wind blows your boat right into the branches, and you lose the fish instantly. Before you pitch into the nastiest snag on the bank, you must plan your exit strategy. Ask yourself, if I hook a 10-pounder right now, exactly how am I getting it out? You must position your boat or your feet on the bank so that you have a completely clear pulling lane. You want to pull the fish away from the worst branches, not directly into them. If there is a heavy wind, point the nose of your boat right into the wind and hold your position steady with the trolling motor. Anchor down if you have to. If you are on the bank, make sure you have solid, firm footing. Do not cast while balancing on a slippery, muddy slope. When that violent strike happens, you need maximum leverage. Proper positioning ensures that you are prepared to win. Let us be totally honest about the heavy mental toll this style of fishing takes on you. It is deeply, incredibly frustrating. There will be tough days when absolutely nothing goes right. You will miss the tiny gap in the branches and hang your heavy jig in a tree 3 feet above the water. You will ruin the entire spot trying to shake it loose. The wind will blow your braided line into a nasty briar patch. You will confidently set the hook on what feels like a world record fish, only to pull up a heavy, waterlogged chunk of dead wood. It takes a massive amount of patience and a very cool head. You cannot get angry. Anger makes you sloppy and careless. When you get frustrated, you start making lazy casts. You stop aiming for the tiny holes. You start fishing the edges again just because it is much easier. You must fight that urge with everything you have. Take a deep breath. Sit down for a minute. Retie your knot. Remind yourself exactly why you are doing this. You are not out here to catch 20 small fish. You are hunting for one single bite from a true monster. That level of reward requires immense discipline. The ultimate reward for all this suffering, all the lost tackle, the snagged lines, and the extreme patience, is a moment you will absolutely never forget for the rest of your entire life. There is nothing in fishing quite like the massive adrenaline rush of pulling a giant out of a tiny, impossible hole. One moment, you are staring intensely at an ugly dead bush. The next moment, the water completely erupts. Mud, water, and shattered twigs fly high into the air as a massive golden-green slab of heavy muscle fights for its life at the end of your short line. It is brutal close-quarters combat. You see the massive bucket mouth, you hear the violent thrashing, and you feel the raw, untamed power vibrating through the heavy rod right into your forearms. It is not a distant splash 50 yards away. It is happening right in front of your face. When you finally slide your thumb firmly into the mouth of that beast, hoist it out of the tangled mess, and realize you just conquered the king of the swamp on his own turf. It changes you forever. You outsmarted the smartest fish in the lake by going into the exact place everyone else feared. Once you fully experience that incredible success, your entire mindset about fishing shifts permanently. You will absolutely never look at a body of water the same way again. The beautiful, clean, pristine banks will suddenly look incredibly boring and completely lifeless to you. You will drive your boat right past the open water without a second thought. Your eyes will constantly scan the shoreline, actively searching for the ugliest, nastiest, most twisted piles of wood and debris you can possibly find. A massive, thorny bush hanging low over the water will look exactly like a glowing treasure chest. You will become a highly focused sniper, seeking out the darkest shadows and the absolute tightest gaps. You will gladly trade a whole box of lost jigs for the chance to tangle with one giant. You have finally broken free from the old, safe habits that keep most anglers stuck in mediocrity. You now know the brutal, honest truth. The real monsters do not play fair, and they do not live in nice neighborhoods. If you have the courage to cast in there, you will catch the fish that other people only dream about. So gear up and get ready for the jungle. To sum it all up, we have broken down exactly why open water is mostly a playground for small fish, and why the true monsters of the lake seek the absolute safety of dense, ugly snags. The biggest, most unexpected revelation here is that the very thing that scares you the most, getting hopelessly snagged, is the exact indicator that you are finally putting your bait in the right spot. It completely transforms how you see a lake, turning the ugliest, most tangled messes into the most beautiful targets on the water. It proves that to catch a trophy, you have to be willing to lose a little tackle and fight a brutal, close-quarters battle. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out today. If this video changed the way you look at heavy cover, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and join our community of hardcore anglers. Now, I want to hear from you. What is the biggest fish you have ever lost to a nasty snag, or miraculously pulled out of one? Let me know your best story in the comments below, and I will see you on the water.